Hi, everybody. My name is
Hello,
Khawaja.
my name is Dmitry.
It's so good to meet you. And I met you for the first time when I wanted to get involved deeper in the Valkey community.
Mhm.
And I know you as the person who runs the Valkey Seattle meetup group. But what do you do when you're not organizing awesome meetups for Valkey in Seattle?
Well, I do have a full-time job,
Okay.
and I work at Oracle Cloud, and I'm a lead engineer on OCI Cache project. And basically, we offer managed Redis and Valkey services to our customers. And before that, before actually I joined Oracle, I worked at a bunch of startups when I used Redis. I'm sorry I said the R word, but yeah, I've used it and found it to be a very useful technology. And I actually used to run a Seattle Redis meetup before COVID, and then during COVID, basically, it kind of died. So, and then after COVID, I said, hey, let's restart it. And then the Valkey fork happened. So I said, well, I'm going to call it Seattle Valkey Meetup.
Nice.
Yeah,
So Valkey is available in Oracle today?
correct. You can log into OCI console and launch a Valkey cache.
Nice. And can I get Valkey 9 yet?
Not yet.
Okay. I am waiting for Valkey 9 to be available everywhere. I'm super excited about it.
There are some very interesting features.
Um, so you and I talk a lot about one particular part of Valkey when we're not talking about the Valkey community and the meetups and so forth, which is Valkey module. Can you help me understand what Valkey modules are and when would I use a module versus, let's say,
Yeah.
Lua script?
Yeah. Great question. So first of all, you can do a lot of things with native data structures in Valkey, and you can do a lot of things with Lua script. But there are times that you need to go deeper. And one of the use cases for that is creating custom data structures. So there are some interesting modules to do something like Valkey JSON, Valkey Search, and Valkey Bloom filters. There's also a module called Valkey LDAP for LDAP integration. And that is useful for situations where you don't want to take the risk of forking the code base.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you really need to write some custom code that will be executed inside the Valkey process. And modules were actually introduced about 10 years ago. And that was kind of in response to all the different people who wanted back then Redis to do different things. And the modules framework was developed and people started building them, but a lot of that was it's not something you can just like run in the cloud unless you're running your own infrastructure. So that I think held back some of the module development. But if you're running your own servers, you can write your own modules, upload them, and take advantage of all of those features.
Awesome. And do we have to write modules in C or can I use other languages to write a module?
Absolutely. So anything with C bindings. So the most common languages are C, that's original modules. And if you look in the Valkey repo, you'll find a lot of examples. If you're not comfortable with C, there's also C++. So for example, Valkey search module is built in C++.
Okay.
And my favorite is you can write modules in Rust. And one of the other jobs that I have is that I maintain the Valkey modules Rust SDK.
Mm-hmm.
You can find it on the GitHub under the Valkey project. You will see Valkey modules-rs.
Okay.
And I can later show some basics of things you can do with that. Basically, it provides an abstraction on top of the Valkey C code. You take the header file from Valkey, you include it, it generates something called bindings, and then you write Rust code, which integrates with the bindings. And your Rust code is actually executed inside the C process. And if you're really interested, you can even debug it in your IDE. So you will literally have the Valkey process running, and you can set a breakpoint inside your Valkey process on a C line of code, or you can set it inside a module on a Rust line of code, and it will stop when you execute those commands.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I get the benefits of all the type safety
Yes.
and writing secure code inside of Rust, and I can run that inside the Valkey
Exactly.
process.
Exactly. And you get the benefits and the safety of the modules framework itself, because again, Valkey is over 200,000 lines of C code. So if you were to say, oh, I can fork it, sure, I can just make a small change over here. Yes, you can, but it does involve certain risks. So modules, again, give you that safe sandbox. And Rust on top of it also gives you the memory safety. And also, I personally really like the Rust community and the ecosystem and the tooling. It really helps me write code faster.
How complete are the Valkey Rust bindings for modules compared to what I can do in the C?
Should be almost everything there. In fact, we're about to publish a new version of the SDK crate. That's what Rust calls the libraries. And there was just a few things we discovered that weren't yet supported. So we just submitted several PRs over the last month or two and literally hope to publish a new crate either tomorrow or next week.
Okay.
But they were they're fairly obscure things. You should be able to do almost everything. If anybody is trying to do something with the Rust module and is not able to access one of the underlying Valkey module APIs, please let us know. Log an issue on the GitHub Valkey module RS page, and we'll take a look at it.
So shifting gears a little bit, because I want to talk a lot more about writing modules in Rust for Valkey. Yeah. What is your favorite module in Valkey?
So the one I like in Rust is Valkey Bloom. So it's a nice module. It introduces a concept of Bloom filters, and actually collaborated very closely with the module author on the Rust SDK. So we actually included some of the things that as they were building that module, we discovered some improvements in the SDK. So we kind of like upstreamed that into the SDK. But the Valkey Bloom module is also open source. You can find it on GitHub under the Valkey project. And you can look at it, and it gives you really good examples of how you can build a more powerful module with custom data types and ability to persist that data locally in RDB file. So it really kind of explores a lot of possibilities with what you can do with Valkey module. And it does it in Rust.
Awesome. But if you weren't limited to Rust, what would be your favorite Valkey module of all time?
Well, so it's kind of a funny story. So there's a Valkey JSON, which is written in C, but the original version of it in the R company version, Redis, that was actually written in Rust. So if you Google Redis JSON, you'll find that code written in Rust. But the Valkey JSON is written in C.
Okay. So what's so exciting about the Valkey JSON module?
The cool thing about it is that you can take a very complex JSON document and save it, and then access very specific attributes. Let's say you have a very large object, and maybe let's say it's a megabyte of data. With raw Valkey, you can use a string data type to serialize it. So now you're taking a megabyte of JSON data, you serialize it into a string, you're sending it across the wire to Valkey. It's going to handle it, no problem. But let's say you need to modify one of the attributes. So now you have to take that whole document as a string, use get command to extract it out of Valkey. In your applications, you have to serialize it or deserialize it. Then you have to modify the one attribute you wanted, and then you have to send the whole thing back. So obviously, a lot of performance overhead. Versus
so I can surgically edit a particular attribute in my JSON without having to send the whole thing over the wire.
Perfect example. Yeah, perfect analogy. Yeah. So you surgically modify a very specific field, and you can, I believe you can go up to 128 levels.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, so it's a huge performance gain. And again, JSON is extremely popular. It's extremely powerful. So the ability to persist it is very useful, and ability to manipulate it as JSON.
Can I index the attributes inside JSON?
It's not yet supported in a JSON module, but that could be done outside. And that's actually a very interesting thing, because that would enable us to Valkey and turn it into a full document style database. So you can have keys that begin with different prefixes, like say users versus products. And then whatever the attributes inside that, you can index very specific fields. So maybe you want to index users on the first name attribute, so you can easily find all users with the first name Dmitry. And basically, as these indexes are created, you can have the callbacks. Now, there's some capabilities for that in the full text search that is available in the Valkey search. But I think Valkey search was originally focused on the vector similarity search, and now they're adding these full text search capabilities. But this case is actually simpler. You just want to index a specific field by a specific string, so you're doing exact match.
So awesome.
So perhaps Valkey search module can easily support that as well.
So can modules interact with each other?
Absolutely, yeah. So you can actually set it up so there's a dependency. So then you have to load module 1 before you load module 2. So because if module 2 depends on features of module 1. But yeah, it's a very flexible framework. I mean, you still have to write code. There's no way around it. But you have this nice, safe sandbox. And if you choose to use Rust, you also have the memory safety features. But you're still leveraging all of the underlying Valkey capabilities, such as replication, cluster mode, persistence to RDB file, and so on.
If a call is made and my module code is handling it, does the main thread block on it?
Yes, so you still have that single thread. So you have to write efficient code, and you have to be mindful of the fact that if your module crashes, it'll most likely crash the entire process as well.
Got it. But there is no way for me to say yield the main thread, but I can keep working kind of in the background, and then
there's some capabilities to run background threads and modules, just like in Valkey itself. So, but yeah, usually if you're building, let's say, a command,
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have like my set and
Mm-hmm.
my get. Well, that's gonna be executed via the main thread.
Got it. Yeah. During the commands,
Yes.
I can
Yeah.
totally imagine.
Yeah, but for example, if you could run a background thread on a module that will do some kind of your own garbage collection, for
Mm-hmm.
example,
Mm-hmm.
like you can create your own additional data structures. You can just have like maybe you want to aggregate certain statistics
Mm-hmm.
that are not available via the main Valkey info command.
Mm-hmm.
So you can create your own data structure, whatever it needs to be, and then you can run either server cron process, and that will run like by default it runs every 100 milliseconds, I think. And then every 100 milliseconds, you'll just regenerate whatever those statistics are, or just run a background thread and just sleep for whatever second, and then a second later, you will regenerate the stats and so on. And then what you can do is you can build a custom command that will access those custom data structures, and you can extract them.
Awesome.
So
So for a lot of people, crossing the chasm and writing a module sounds very overwhelming. And I suspect some
yeah,
of this is because they haven't seen what the interface looks like. So would you be willing to walk us through what the interface looks like and perhaps how to write a Hello World Rust module?
well, in fact, I even wrote a blog post around it about it. You can go to valkey.io, and there's like a blog section. And actually, I think one of the first blog posts where I literally walked people through example of writing a hello world in C and in Rust.
Awesome. We'll
But
put the link for that blog post
absolutely,
in the comments.
but I'm showing you right here is the Valkey module Rust SDK, which, as I said, I help maintain. So what the SDK does is it takes the header files from the Valkey project,
Mm-hmm.
and it will automatically generate something called bindings. And the bindings are basically, it's a Rust code that corresponds to the header files.
Mm-hmm.
And later you can access it in your Rust code and basically just call these bindings. So I know this all sounded very abstract, so let me get to something a little bit more practical, and that is examples. By the way, you can also find a lot of examples in the Valkey repo, and those examples are in C, but here we gave them to you in Rust. So for example, let's say you want to build a custom data type.
Mm-hmm.
So we give you a really nice example that shows you how to do that and what the data will be and what are the additional commands you need to implement to access that custom data types. If you want to, let's say, take advantage of certain events that happen inside the Valkey server process, there's an example called events. If you want to take advantage of access control lists, we have a module called ACL, and so on. But yeah.
So if I were to build a custom data type, do I just get access to like a memory buffer that I can use to treat as my data structure, or how does that
let me
work?
show you an example, actually, the demo I did
Mm-hmm.
at the last year's Amsterdam conference for Valkey. That's called Keyspace. So what I did here is I built a module to support queues. So very frequently, Valkey can be used as a message broker. The downside is that Valkey data structures are fairly generic. So for example, lists, it's a multi-purpose data structure. It can be used as a queue.
Mm-hmm.
But you frequently have to do other things. For example, you have to accumulate certain statistics on how many jobs you executed in the last hour or in the last day. So for that, a more natural fit is a hash map.
Mm-hmm.
So what a lot of libraries do is they build abstractions leveraging those individual data structures under the hood. The downside is that when you switch libraries, you get a very different user experience.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you switch programming languages. So for example, I did a lot of work in Ruby when I worked at startups, and Ruby had a very nice library called Sidekick. And then I switched to Python, and Python had different libraries. So again, there was a certain friction. So what I'm doing here in this library is in this module is I'm pushing all this logic lower inside the Valkey process. So I have a custom data structure called valqueue. Then I have a whole bunch of custom commands. And then I implemented the ability to save this data locally. There's a RDB load and RDB save functions. And also I have ability to create queues. And you can track how many queues you have. So because you may have a Valkey server that is used as a cache, and then if you load this module, it's used as a queue. So wouldn't it be nice if you could create queues explicitly and then look up statistics on those queues, and then delete queues if you wanted to, and that'll just automatically delete all the messages in the queue and all the statistics. But all of this is, again, encapsulated in one key. And that also gives a much cleaner, much safer experience, because if you're using a library that's manipulating multiple Valkey keys under the hood, well, another application could access the same Valkey server and have access to those keys. Or an operator could access it via Valkey CLI, and potentially delete some of those keys, which may break the business logic in your whatever message broker functionality that you're leveraging. But by pushing this lower and by having this one key for each queue, I control it much tighter.
Nice.
And like I said, the user experience is very consistent because there are these custom commands that I develop, like push, pop, and so on. So if folks are really interested, just check out the Keyspace Amsterdam 2025. And there's a talk there I did on building Rust modules, and I walk in a lot of detail how I build this queue module. And there's also a lot of other things I did here. For example, I really strongly believe that a queue should have ability to do exponential backoff. And then if you're using underlying Valkey data structures, that's where the sorted set data structure comes in. But again, that's another key that you're creating. So now you have a list, you have a sorted set, and you have a hash map, all for one queue that you're creating.
So it ends up being a much tighter abstraction.
Exactly.
And you can have like dead letter queues and so forth.
Yes,
That
absolutely.
is very powerful.
And I also have ability to do like multiple retry attempts. Again, the downside with lists is once you pop an item off a list in Valkey, it's gone. So again, the client library has to have somehow ability to say, oh, I'm popping this item of a list, but I haven't completed that job execution yet.
Right. So if you want it to fail, and if the client goes away,
If the client crashes after it popped the message off the list, the queue will never know. So, so you cannot have a guaranteed of at least once delivery. So what you want to do is you want to basically take that message off the queue and move it to something in process or in flight. And then the queue can be smart enough that it tracks it. And until it receives explicit acknowledgement that this message has been completed, it will not let go of this message. And in fact, it can make this message available to another worker for processing after, let's say, a certain time. So in this queue example, again, I have all these abilities and I make it configurable. So for example, how many maximum attempts should there be?
Yeah. So you can basically build, Amazon SQS as a Valkey module.
I believe SQS does not support exponential backoff. You can only go up to about 15 minutes. So that's, again.
So you can do even better.
In fact, I use the U64 data structure as my exponential backoff. So I Googled it, and U64 basically gives you you can schedule jobs for execution up to 500 billion years into the future.
Talk about durable execution.
Well, I thought about using U32, and it would have saved memory, but the year 2038 is kind of close.
The world deserves 64 bits.
Yes, exactly. 64 bits is important. Anyway, I mean, in fact, I think overall, if you have memory consumption, it's going to be a very small percentage, because in typical message that you're pushing to a queue, you're going to have a lot of attributes. Let's say you're sending an email. So you're going to have like the email address, you're going to have the name, some other attributes that you can then somehow inject in your email template or whatever, right? So that delayed execution time is that while 64 bits is more than 32 bits, it's still a smaller percentage of the overall payload.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So again, it's a pretty interesting module. Again, I haven't actually been able to deploy it in any kind of production environments. This was more of a personal project, but like I said, it's on GitHub.
It sounds like a great example. Yeah. I am curious, like one last question about Rust modules. If I was starting from scratch today, how long does it take me to go from not knowing anything about Valkey modules and publishing my Hello World module in my own Valkey deployment?
If you follow that blog article that I mentioned, I think you can do it in a couple of hours. I mean, if you have to be reasonably familiar with Rust. That certainly helps.
Yeah. I mean,
So
if you know Rust, but you know nothing about Valkey modules.
Yeah, so if you know Rust and you know how to basically build these libraries, because at the end of the day, these are, on Linux, they'll be SO, shared object. On Windows, these will be DLLs, and on Mac, it's going to be .dylib files. So if you understand the concept of building a library in Rust, and you're using the Rust module SDK, I think you can do it in a couple hours. Easily.
All right, that's challenge accepted.
Right.
We're gonna try it with a few people and see if we can get there.
Are you volunteering?
I'll do it, and I will share in the comments if I could write my first Rust module in less than 2 hours.
And if you want something simple, again, the Valkey module it's got a lot of business logic there. So the Bloom filter module. But if you want something really simple, this was kind of like a personal hackathon on the weekend. I built a module called Patience.
Okay.
Valkey is fast, right? But what if you have a situation that for whatever reason it's a little slow in responding to your request? Could be a network latency issue. Could be some kind of
it's like fault injection.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what this module allows us to do is it allows you to slow down your responses. And I'm able to actually enable and disable it at runtime using
Can I do it on a particular key?
Oh, that's actually an interesting idea. I don't have it per key. I have it.
But can I build that with the?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can.
That's very powerful. I
Yeah,
can like
absolutely. So
throttle certain keys.
absolutely. So what I'm doing behind the scenes there, I'm using something called filters.
Mm-hmm.
And filter is something that's been supported by Valkey for a long time. And actually, last year we added some functionality to make it much easier for you to build filters in the Rust modules. So
It's
basically,
amazing.
all you have to do is just you kind of write this slip filter fn, and it actually calls this function, and it's going to execute. And here, you can actually, the nice thing about this module is I built it so you can enable and disable it at runtime
Yeah.
without restarting Valkey process. You can also configure how slow you want it to be. So basically, it's between 1 millisecond by default and 1 second, 1,000
Right.
milliseconds max. And again, if you want to make it slower, just change the code, right? And also, I'm working on adding ability to filter for specific commands. But I really like the idea of filtering for specific keys or perhaps key patterns. So you can, and again, I can add custom configuration here, so you can disable, let's say, you can enable filtering for keys that begin with Dmitry. Yeah.
This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you ever wanted to.
And again, it's like about 50 lines of code.
Wow.
One file.
Okay. That's a really good starting point
Yeah.
because, sometimes people they'll migrate to Valkey and they'll say, this is way faster than anything I've experienced. So if you want to, get feature compatibility, you can slow Valkey down a little bit so it can be like the old times.
Well, when you're important, they'll wait.
Dmitry, it was a true pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for teaching me about modules and Rust modules. I will take you up. I'm going to try to see if I can write my first Rust module in under 2 hours.